Okay. Okay.
Sorry for the interruption. Keep going.
No. I mean, it's just fine. So what are you up to in San Diego? Oh, and comes Amir. Good. You know Amir, Laura?
I do not. I know of him, but I'm looking forward to getting to know Amir. Hello.
1 second. I'm just walking to get situated. 1 second.
Amir, I'm so delighted that you are joining us.
Oh, with my great pleasure. 1 second.
Yes. You know, I was going to also, can we see you or are you?
I'm just connecting my camera. 1 second.
Okay. I'll wait until you have done your tech work.
Can you see me now?
Yes, we can see
Wonderful.
you.
Hello,
Hello.
everyone. Sorry again. Little on my side. One of the camera died, so I have to connect that.
Where are you, Amir?
I'm very good, thank you. And I was very sorry to hear about the passing of your husband. And I searched a bit about him, and it was wonderful. So
He was indeed wonderful. And if you like wry humor, you ought to get a hold of his, he even on top of all his scholarly work on Darwin, etc., he wrote a wonderful story for both children and adults of just off-the-wall fairy tales called Grandmother's Garden. I mean, like it's got a story about the little carrot, the baby carrot who wanted to be a speedboat driver.
yeah, this is really
completely absolutely imaginative and creative. This is wonderful. So we have 3 more people for this small group, but I don't know what happened to them. And I wonder if we want to get started with just what we have. I mean, I'm trying to remember who, Nancy Giordano, and who isn't here?
James Ehrlich and Laura Koch.
And Laura Koch, yes. All of whom I think you'll enjoy meeting if they get here, which they're already. Do you want to email them and do something about their getting here?
I can do that, yes. I'm gonna go off screen for just a moment while I take care of that, and I'll be right back.
Well, all right. So I was asking Laura what she's up to. She's now in San Diego, but your headquarters are in New York, aren't they, Laura?
They are. But since the pandemic, I would say I'm spending, it's kind of a reverse. Although in the past 6 months, I've been to New York much more frequently, and probably the future is about going to be 50-50. We still have an apartment in New York City. We have our residence in San Diego, but I'm, you know, I have still a lot of involvement in the fashion industry. So still working with the fashion industry to try to make it more sustainable, more compassionate, more of a partnerism instead of a domination model. But I'm very busy right now. I'm on working with the Rainforest Partnership and working really on exactly what we're talking about right now, is how to use technology to enable things for good. This has never been a more necessary thing than right now. So what we're all doing is very important. Thank you, Rian.
Well, I think that you'll enjoy hearing from Amir. Amir, where are you now? Because I know you travel all over the world.
I do. Right now I'm in Irvine, not very far from San Diego.
Oh,
yes.
What are you doing in Irvine?
Irvine, and I was in Paris, and I'm going to be again in Geneva in 2 weeks. So I'm trying to work on a global festival or conference of sort. That's why I'm traveling a little bit. And by the way, Laura, being between New York and San Diego is a good thing. You can maintain that.
It is. I like it. I must say, I think I'm in an enviable position. It sounds like you are as well. Where's your permanent residence, or are you an urban nomad?
I'm more of a nomad, but I was in San Francisco before for many years, and then came to LA. Didn't like LA much in terms of the traffic and everything else. So I moved to a house that my father-in-law has near Irvine that I'm staying right now, but also between Paris and Irvine.
Well, Paris,
New York.
yeah.
We'll be in New York afterwards, right? My son is in New York, and he's asking me to spend more time in New York, which I love.
Okay.
Here is with AI for good. And I think we're doing introductions and Sarah isn't here. So I don't know quite what to do here. But why don't you tell us a little about your work with AI for good?
Of course, with pleasure. So I have been working on, in the past few years, with an organization called XPRIZE. XPRIZE is a nonprofit that creates very large competitions about going to the moon, or basically saving the corals of the oceans, or empowering education, things of that nature. Very large competitions, multi-year, multi-million-dollar competitions. And then in 2015, when the Sustainable Development Goals were printed, this is a rejuvenation of the millennial goals of the UN. I designed a prize called AI for Humanity, and the goal was to show how machines and humans can coexist and work together to improve life and society and so forth. So that was a call for ideas, call for project, call for solutions, was nothing else. And that led us to identify a number of those solutions. We have more than 10,000 entries. And then when we came out observing the responses, those responses were more about social change. It was not about self-driving cars or financial predictions or anything else. It was about saving people, gender equality, poverty, humanity, and so forth. So I turned that to a couple of UN agencies. We partnered with them and created this conference called AI for Good Global Summit. And this conference intention was to talk about how we can use predictive capability of machine learning to help us better understand life and the world and predict a future that we want. It's very technological, though, because we talked about machine learning and AI. But somehow we learned a lot in that process, and we talked about focusing on a couple of sustainable goals, such as gender equality and health and well-being, as an example. So this is the story I've been driving over the past few years, and really bringing a number of different stakeholders to talk about how to create projects and solutions that could showcase what we're talking about. Because publishing white papers and conferences is good, but doesn't go very far beyond educating people and getting them interested. So we wanted to showcase and projects that are going to be sustained. So that has been my work in the past 3 years. And now I'm transitioning gradually to continue this work on creating a future film festival.
I love that.
To capture people's ideas about the future. Because again, what I observed, and you probably have observed that as well, this is becoming a long introduction, by the way. What I observed was that when you add everyone in the world that is thinking about fashion, design, culture, change, innovation, investment, PhDs and Nobel laureates, all the people that are in some shape or form involved in those topics, when you add them up, they make up less than 5% of the world population. So pretty much 95% of the world is not even privy to these ideas or discussions, or even involved in this future forecasting or improving life. So that got me basically a shock. And then I started to gear, not just alone, the effort on trying to listen to the 95% of the people. How they see the future, what they want in the future. Do they want more diplomacy? Do they want more health? Do they want more partnership? Do they want more empathy? Do they want more family life? Do they want more robots in their life? Do they want to go to Mars? Do they want to have more individualism or more agency? We don't know. We think we know because scholars and thinkers and innovators basically project that future. And we try to basically be agent of others, but we don't have enough questions. So to make it entertaining and fun, we're doing a storytelling challenge where we ask people to either come up with a story or a film or an animation or a short 2 minutes about the life in the day of the future. And if they don't have the capability of creating a short movie or something, come up with a story and we match them with filmmakers. But we want visuals because those visuals help us understand the connection between emotions and ideas and how we feel life. So it's called Our Future Life. It's about our future that we create collectively and making it available to more people through film. So that's my transition path, if I can say it this way.
Well, I'm thinking of Quincy's wonderful graphics on our website as one possibility, but we'll talk about that. But Sarah, what did you find out about our people here?
I have emailed them to remind them and included the link. So we'll just hope that they find us on their calendars or in that link and join us as we go. But I think we should go ahead and
well, we've
already begun and we should continue.
We have gone ahead. So why don't I go back to you, Sarah, to officially open this up, okay?
Sure.
Because Sarah has put together with Quincy a PowerPoint, and you will see it.
Well, so I'm Sarah Salty. Laura, I think we have met.
Yes.
I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, Amir. I've been working with Rian the last 12 years at the center, primarily on educational initiatives. And I also want to introduce you to Quincy Tickner, whose name doesn't appear, but that's Quincy. And Quincy, do you want to share a little bit about your role at the center?
Yeah, so I've been working here for about over a year, and similar to what you were saying, Amir, like white papers and all of that is super important, but getting the information to people is something that I think is more of a challenge. So I've been creating a bunch of infographics and media kits that kind of put Rian's research and all of the work that she's dedicated her life to in like one pagers and things that you can share on social media and all of that, which has been really fun. So it's combing through all of Rian's work and putting it in ways that is much easier to understand and take in. And my dream would be to, get an illustrator and kind of use that to storytell, kind of what you were saying. So yeah, that's my role here.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Yes. Welcome, Quincy.
Yes. Yes. So let me share my screen here and just give you a sense of what we had hoped to cover today. Rian is going to speak just briefly first to share some context and set the stage for us. And then we've already sort of had our chance to have introductions. So what we'd like to do next is just begin after we hear from Rian to have some high-level reactions to the draft toolkit that we shared with you. I'm wondering, Laura and Amir, have you had a chance to look at that toolkit?
Yes.
You have, but Amir, you haven't had that opportunity yet. So what we might do first is just walk through it really quickly together and then have a chance for sort of high-level response. And then we're going to go a little bit deeper into some of the sections of the toolkit and invite your feedback in a little bit more fine-grained way. Then we thought we'd start a conversation today that we were hoping to continue in our session on March 21st, which we'll talk more about. which here just says wish lists, but is really about, in whose hands do we want to see this toolkit in its as it gets into its final form? What are the sort of the dream directions for this to move, and how might we move this into the right people's hands and into action in the world? And then we'll just have some closing reminders. So that's kind of the flow of how we're envisioning spending our time. Rihanna, I'm going to turn it back to you to offer your context.
Well, I'm not going to spend 10 minutes on it. I just want to say, you both know my work. It's whole systems work. And Amir, to the point that you made, that we don't know what 95% of the people are thinking, part of the problem is that a good portion of those people are in the old paradigm. They don't know what their choices are. So I think that this toolkit is a way of showing that we do have choices, but they're not the conventional ones, of right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, capitalist, socialist, but that we really need new thinking if we're going to achieve something. And I am just wondering how, this is kind of a sidebar, but I'm thinking of your film festival. Perhaps we can devote part of it to new ways of looking at the world. Because unfortunately, many of the answers, many of the entries that you're going to get are people who are still don't have the partnership alternative, don't know that there's a connection between the environmental movement and the movement for gender equity and the Black Lives Matter movement and social and economic justice movements, that they're all really challenging the same thing, traditions of domination. And once we have that holistic frame, so we, in putting this toolkit together, have tried to provide that. And I do want to say that we really need your input. Laura, you didn't really introduce yourself completely, so I'm going to let you talk about your connection to conscious capitalism in just a moment. But you and Amir actually have a lot in common, in the sense that, I see, as I said in my keynote to conscious capitalism, that I see conscious capitalism, even though it still talks about capitalism alone, as a movement that is part of the partnership movement, because it's challenging the old norms for, buyer beware, for example.
Yes.
It's crazy. Why should buyer have to beware?
Right.
But in the old domination, you had better beware,
Mm-hmm.
or you're in deep, deep trouble, right?
Correct. Yes.
So I'm not going to make mine a formal introduction, except to say that we want this to be a useful tool. And what we also want very much are your practical ideas and contexts for dissemination once we have a more developed toolkit with your input. So did I leave anything vital out, Sarah?
No, I think that's a wonderful starting point. And I think the other piece of context is that we're hosting 3 of these conversations this week with small groups, and then we're going to be taking everything we hear and using it to shape a next draft, a refined version of the toolkit. And on March 21st, we'll invite everyone who participates all week long this week to come to that conversation, and not only sort of get a sense of how your feedback has shaped the product, but but also to continue the conversation that we'll start today about where do we go with this, and how do we move it in the right directions. So we'll start that conversation today, and then you'll have an opportunity on the 21st to meet others who are participating and kind of continue that implementation kind of conversation. Laura, we should come back to you and give you a chance to speak a little bit more about the broader context of your work in the world.
Certainly. Well, I am a capitalist, but I don't view myself at all as the kind of traditional shareholder, top-down dominator capitalist. There are a lot of us, and more business leaders and people in business who have realized that there is a different way that we can do business, whether they're in the fashion industry or whatever industry. Business is quickly, I think, especially because of what's happened to all of us the past 2.5 years. You know, a lot of things that probably might have taken longer to reach a tipping point place have been exacerbated and accelerated by that combination of, you know, at one time, a social justice crisis, a health crisis, an economic crisis, all on top of, for me, an already existing climate crisis. And it is going to require whole systems change for us all as human beings, I think, to solve these problems. And Rian's work over her body of work over the years is validation, it is proof, it is the kind of thinking that I think we are grateful for now. But I will say that especially for me, the younger business leaders, and that's what gets me up in the morning. That's why I'm hopeful. I think Gen Z and I think millennials are going to force a change, and thank heavens that they are. We are at a tipping point. We know that. We don't need anything more than what's happened the past 2 weeks. My husband was born in Ukraine. This is personal for me. So let me just say that everything that we're all going through together as a human species is forcing us to look at ourselves and be very, very honest. The truth is, Amir is, he's also leading the way. And I have, Amir, been very fortunate over the past 2 years to learn more about the X Prize. I didn't know that you were an X Prize guy because I'm a strategic advisor on a for-profit board with a company called Unity. They're based in Seattle. So Joe and Annie and Alvaro, Peter Diamantis, I think that what I've realized is that technology is going to be the enabler. It can either be used for good or for bad. I think we have to now embrace that fact. We have to bring every sector together: business, finance, academia, government. So we're going to have to get governments involved. And I'm going to just say that my goal, I think, is to use all of the network I have, all of the resources that I have as a business leader, including in the fashion industry, and every other kind of industry, to galvanize and amplify this message. We are not going to do it without technology. And I actually believe that this toolkit, if we can focus it, especially on Gen Z, I look at Quincy, I'm looking at that face and I'm going, that's who this needs to be for. So I am committed full on to whatever it takes to do this.
I love that. Thank you. And Nancy, I'm so sorry you had trouble getting in. I don't
know what, I'm just, as much as we say technology is the savior, if it doesn't all work fluidly, it's a huge frustration. So
yes.
I'm en route between LA and Santa Barbara, and I stopped at Starbucks and thought I could do it with my iPad and thought I could log in. And anyway, whatever. So I'm sitting in my car now with you all. So apologies for being late, but I caught the last half of your impassioned comments, Laura. So thank you.
We're all in California, I think.
Amir is in California too. Amir, for Nancy, can you just very briefly, and also Quincy, by the way, I think you've met her, haven't you, Nancy?
I'm not sure if I have. Hi, Quincy. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, I've met you really briefly. It's great to see you again.
Thank you.
Quincy is working with us, with Sarah and me on this project
Yay.
for CPS. And but she also, as you know, does wonderful graphics and stories and
Got it. Yes.
But Amir, why don't you just, if you don't mind, this is very nonlinear, which is okay, because life is nonlinear despite what we're taught. So can you just sort of encapsulate a little bit what you're about so that Nancy can get to know you, and then Nancy, you can tell us about yourself.
Sure. Hi, Amir.
Hi, Nancy. Very briefly, I'm an engineer entrepreneur by trade and by origin, but I've transitioned into the world of impact through the work of impact investment for 10 years, which I saw not leading to what I wanted to achieve. And then I met the folks at XPRIZE. We're trying to do global competitions to bring change and innovation to more people and crowdsource it. I'm
pretty familiar with XPRIZE. I'm a member of Singularity University. It's part of their global, whatever faculty, not faculty, guest lecture series. So
you know this whole ecosystem, and through that work, I connected with the United Nations agencies, a number of them, to start working on how to bring change to the people on the ground. Because I was tired of this whole intellectual intelligentsia talking about the big concept and not being able to distill properly to everyone what we're talking about. So I started with work on the ground, and that led me to a number of efforts. One of them was a global summit on impact of AI on sustainable development goals, and trying to work with a number of countries to identify what problems people are living with and how AI can solve those problems.
Great.
And then gradually from that, because I'm thinking about entrepreneurship and innovation, I'm trying to figure out what the next waves of innovation will be. And for that, I'm on a new project now with a number of other organizations, such as the World Economic Forum and Stanford University and others, about creating a film festival where the idea is to tell stories about the future. Not films or documentaries, but basically picturing images of our life in 20 or 30 or 40 years from now. And from that, come back to today about what people want. And we try to get the average person in the world, out of the 8 billion people that we have, close to 8 billion people, try to incentivize a number of them that are not the usual suspect that come up with narratives about the future to come with one. And try to understand the differences, bottom-up approach of what we talk about and what they feel they understand, what they want. So this is what I'm involved right now.
Wow. There's many, many intersections between my world and yours. Yeah, we do it through the context of RAM, but just so more broadly, I've always been an impact player, I guess. It's so interesting for me to hear people, and I'm not saying this about you, I'm just saying this about the category in general. It's like I used to do this and now I'm impact, versus for me, everything in my world has been since the beginning of my career in business trying to figure out how to use all of these tools and things. I was in advertising for the beginning of my career with Ogilvy and Shia Day and all those guys, building world-class brands and seeing how the internet came in and changed everything. And then later on, how mobile and social changed everything, but always orienting toward how do we hold people well with the food that we create, with the products that we create, with the messages that we create. Like none of this should be exploitive, and none of this should be, for harm. So as we have moved, and more and more into this technology future, I started getting really worried that people were unprepared for what was coming. I built I started my own company consulting for brands 15 years ago, so to make them value centric and outside of just a big, advertising campaign. Really, what did the company stand for? I built a whole model around the future of branding and how we didn't want brands just to understand us. We want to understand them. And it turned more and more into corporate consulting, but it became really frustrating to see how hard it was to get organizations to change the way they think, to be able to absorb and respond to new information. So I jumped ship and I went to go build an AI company. I was asked to join a team about 7 years ago, working with a guy named Doug Lunnett, who had been a big founder in this space. And with 22 people trying to build what we thought was going to be the internet or the AI $1 trillion company of the future. We didn't get funded, but it was really, really interesting to see, again, even with forward thinking adults who really understand this technology, how hard it was for them to change. And so then when we didn't get funded, I built a conference on the 7 most disruptive technologies with my buddy who started GigaOM. Or by GigaOM. And so over the course of 2.5 days, programmed it to have an industry leader, a practitioner, and a visionary across all of these: AI, robotics, nanotechnology, VR, AR, 3D printing, cybersecurity, human machine interface. We had people there from IBM and Amazon and HP and UPS and many, many, many others. And it was really fascinating, again, to see how unprepared we are for how much change is coming our way. So I started talking more about it and so I describe myself as a strategic futurist. I really am interested in the strategic side, but I feel like there's really, trying to just wake people up to this has been more my work in the last few years. And so I'm a global keynote speaker, travel around, I added it up, Rhiannon, in the last year and a half, been invited to speak in 20 countries around the world, from Serbia to Warsaw to Malaysia, et cetera, and was part of Singularity's global expert, whatever, not faculty, but whatever we are. We run around and do these programs. And I wrote a book last year on how to change our mindset from an industrial era to this, whatever we want to call this next year. I'm calling it exponential productivity era, because we'll be able to, Laura's point, solve so many problems in so many ways and be able to distribute resources so much more effectively as we move forward, that there just has to be a mindset shift. And where part of the intersection is I also got to work with Jacqueline Novogratz at Acumen and did a strategic engagement for her, their 10-year mark, about how to really shift the conversation from just their work to being, greater leaders in the overall impact, if you will, industry, and really about this idea: how do you empower people to create their own decisions, right? Not to come in top down and solve them for them, but how to really empower them. And she taught me a lot about this. I did a talk, actually, a TEDx talk on humble audacity that really came from my work with Jacqueline and how inspired I was by her. But that led me then to also projects that I champion. Like, what are the things on the planet that I really think are going to make the world a better place, and how can I accelerate that at the same time I'm trying to blunt the other things? So currently I'm also an advisor now to another small AI startup. So I keep my feet in the AI world so we can, again, figure out how to channel it for good. And I'm a big champion of the Responsible AI Institute. I'm a big champion of Arthur Brock's work and Holochain. And I'm very close to him. And actually, Arthur just called me. I think he's coming to Austin for South by Southwest. I didn't get to see him at the end of the week, which I'm very excited about. But that led me then to an event at Bretton Woods where I got to be exposed to Rhiannon's work and be, again, very appreciative and a champion of partnership systems and what they can do in terms of being able to, it aligns right with the mindset that I believe that we need to get to. And I don't have nearly decades of thoughtful work behind it that Rhiannon has. So I've been grateful to learn more and again, champion that. So now as I go talking around the world, including now to Google, we're going to do a whole series of talks for Google as part of their ongoing training for directors. I get to talk about Holochain. I get to talk about partnership systems and social wealth index and try and open people's aperture to this. The last thing I will say is I've also been a champion around science fiction and how that helps or hurts our belief system. So a couple of times I've done events. We did at the opening of GigaOM. I did a big thing at South by one year about whether dystopian versus protopian, if you will. Science fiction serves us better or worse. And clearly utopian or protopian science fiction is a better driver and storytelling than just scaring us all the time is. And so there's actually another futurist. I started a thing called the Femme Futurist Society a couple of years ago to bring more the voice of women in this work more visible. And one of the women that I've met along the way is named Monica. I can never remember her last name, but she's a protopian futurist, and she's all about the 7 characteristics of protopian narratives. So that'd be really interesting to line that up with the film festival that you're doing. So that, because for me, it's about positive storytelling and imaginative storytelling. There's another woman named Phoebe Thickle who's all about moral imagination and running big, huge workshops for people to be able to imagine a more positive future. So this idea of storytelling, as Rian has taught us for so long, is a really, really key tenet. And there's amazing women doing some amazing work if I can connect you to any of them.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you.
Well,
So sorry, that was way longer than I expected it to be, but there's like all these little places.
well, since there are less of us, it worked out. So why don't we just continue with the agenda, Sarah? And the agenda, as you know, is to get, first of all, I mean, Nancy has been very helpful to us in many ways. And I really, as I said to both Laura and Amir, we need your input because we want to make this, as I see it, it is for a number of groups. Certainly what you said, Amir, earlier, which is on the AI for Good conference, which you kindly asked me to keynote, and were very patient with me getting my technology worked out, but we managed somehow. The issue is really a social issue. The issues are social issues. And the issue is what will be the normative values, the normative stories that are told through this new technology. Will they maintain domination systems? Or do we become conscious of them? And do we then also recognize the partnership alternative and what we have to build in order to get there? And the toolkit, as we put it together, really is trying to achieve that. And based on these 4 cornerstones of childhood, family, of gender, including the gender system of values that we've all internalized, economics, but retaining the partnership elements of both capitalism, trade, really, and of government policies, because if anything was shown by the COVID pandemic is we need both. But the issue is what kinds of rules do we have? We were sort of kidding around about, as I mentioned, to say buyer beware, that is a dominator saying, right? It tells the whole story of dominator capitalism. And of course, the 4th cornerstone is story and language. What are the normative narratives? And we need, I really believe that we absolutely must have new language if we are going to get out of the old mindsets. And that's what the partnership nomination social scale provides. So shall we go back to?
Well, I think what sounded like it might work best is to start by looking together at the toolkit, the tool that we've pulled together, and then get some just high level responses to it. I know people, we don't want to assume that everybody has pored over it in detail. And Amir's let us know he hasn't had a chance to look at it. So I think walking through it real quickly together will be a good starting point, and then we'll get some high level responses and then go from there into more focused conversation about specific areas within the toolkit or other directions that you all would like to take us. So
Sarah, can I just ask, can we drop the stuff back for a minute? So you guys are doing 3, first of all, I started this conversation with you guys weeks ago and then dropped out. You guys have done extraordinary work since then. So first, congratulations on everything that you've done and how much you've pulled together. That gives us as much easier to shape and to edit than it is to create. So great job. And then second of all, in the course of these conversations this week, we're doing today, Wednesday, and Friday with other people. What is the goal to get to that in this series of conversations, just so I can kind of get a sense of the bigger process before we go into the toolkit.
But I think that we want your feedback not only on shaping the toolkit, but also on disseminating it.
Right.
And Laura just said that she has a hard stop at noon. So I think that we should keep that in mind.
Yeah, that'd be helpful for me too, since I'm sitting here in a parking lot. Some random, not the pretty part, by the way. But yeah, so yeah, what you hear, so I think that whatever we can be most helpful with as a group as opposed to separately, I think would be how to use this conversation right now. So if there's, you know, whatever we can do. So just trying to get a sense of, so the hope is you'll have these conversations with some other people on Wednesday and Friday, get collective feedback, and then we can figure out where we go from there in terms of how to disseminate, right?
Yeah, the stage we set here is that we are having the 3 conversations. We're taking in what we learned from those 3. We'll be using those to create a next version of the toolkit and some sense of next steps, which will be presenting back to the whole group. You're invited again to come on the 21st. On the 21st, we'll have the more robust conversation about the implementation questions. Today is really to just get level sort of wish lists for where do we hope this could go, but really the focus is on helping us to get to that next, to give us, I think, 2 levels of feedback. One is, as sort of Rian was leading into, who is this toolkit for? How is it reading to you? How useful and relevant does it feel? And is this approach that we've taken one that is, you know, that can take us, you know, somewhere impactful?
I mean, I'm so glad that right now, Rian, you asked me what South by Southwest is. We didn't have a chance to talk about that, but there's this big event that's happening in Austin. It starts on Friday. This would be the perfect place to have shared this thinking in that audience. So maybe for next year, I mean, I know we don't want to waste a year, but it's where you have these collections of people who are looking for this kind of information. So there are places that we can plug in once we have something tangible. And this is very, very tangible. So this is great.
So our goal was to create something that, just getting to the shareable version here, was to create something that would sort of, in a nutshell, summarize Rian's big thinking and apply it, and then quickly show how that applies to the world of technology, and then offer a set of a way for people who are engaged in either sort of framing issues of technology or actually building new working on technology projects, a set of questions that are worth having in front of us as we do that work. And so the contents really are that this toolkit starts with a background and overview of the continuum and talks about technology and our future. What is the domination partnership continuum, and introduces the 4 cornerstones model as the new foundations for a partnership system. Then really in some ways the advance on the new work that's been done here is in the second section, which is the posing of 8 critical questions for technology builders and framers. And then underneath each of those questions, we've created subscales that allow people to look at specific sort of areas within each of those critical questions and assess on a sort of mini spectrum, you know, where are we now in this continuum from domination to partnership. Then there's a little bit further discussion of those questions. Just why are these, you know, for each question, a little bit more information, and then a page of resources to dive into more deeply into Rian's work. So the background piece is here. There's the high-level overview of the sort of 4 core components of domination and partnership systems. And what I wanted to just home in on here is then we move into these eight questions. Who is framing and building this technology? And there's again, a sort of interactive scales here.
Can you make it a little bit bigger?
I can.
Thank you.
What assumptions and narratives about human nature are embedded in the technology? And there are a series of scales there. What kind of social and economic relationships does the technology support? Where we look at top-down power over versus power with and power to relationships, issues of ranking versus linking, rigid gender categories and roles versus diversity and fluid categories, hierarchies of domination, hierarchies of actualization. What kinds of communities and workplaces does the technology support? Is the 4th question. What gendered family and socioeconomic values are supported by the technology? Where we go more deeply into that cornerstone of gender. Will this technology improve the lives of families and children and promote healthy human development? So this looks at not only parent-child relations, but also normalization of violence as part of entertainment, and the higher valuing of activities and people coded masculine over those coded feminine. Then what kind of relationship with our natural environment is supported by this technology? And finally, does the technology use the language and thinking of domination or partnership? And so then here's the narrative about each one of those questions. And finally, the resource page. So what we hope to have as our first question for you in terms of this toolkit is really just top line, high level reactions to sort of what's in there, how it's put together, how useful and relevant it feels, how you're responding to it. We'd love to hear from both of you.
And if Laura wants to jump in first, and she's got to go, but I'm just going to say I think it's phenomenal, and I think mirrors some of the stuff that the Responsible AI Institute is doing in helping create technical literacy around algorithms and how to build them safely. And they've got the same kind of toolkit approach. So I just think that it's really, really well done. I mean, there's things we can nuance here and there, but I was really excited when I saw it. And I thought it was really tangible and really easy for people to work their way into. It's very accessible.
I agree. I think the key, I applaud all of you for the work you've done. Quincy, if you did the graphics, they're amazing. They're wonderful. I think what we're all going to be grappling with as we get along the way, and March 21st is we're going to have a powerful pitch deck, but who are we going to show it to? And how are we going to do that? And we have an amazing amount of talent just from the people here today and the other people who are going to be joining. I think that it is a moment where we can do things very differently. I think Nancy is leading the charge, Amir is leading the charge. I'm learning more than I ever thought possible about technology, about decentralized finance, about, for example, we could create a DAO that made this all work. So we're going, I think, to have the talent that we need. And I applaud you all for the work that you've done so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Amir, I know that Amir, one of the results of the AI for Good conference was the gender group. But this includes gender, and gender informs it, in some ways because of the gender system of values. But I really am eager to hear what your reaction is to it. And I know that you're coming to it. And I want to say, if I mean, say what is on your mind, you know, don't worry about, we want real feedback. Wait, I
You're-
can't hear you,
yeah.
cannot hear you.
Yeah, there are two feedback. One is on what you just explained, Laura, about the whole toolkit and its intended use and the different part of it, and gender as a topic. I'm going to start first with gender. The way we identify gender is that there is an intersection between gender equality and inequality, how we use it, and environmental issues, climate issues, economic progress, family values, even space exploration. So when it comes to AI and machine learning, today we're using data, if just about machine learning, data that is mostly gathered around white male and either directed by them or gathered for them. For instance, if we talk about predicting cardiovascular diseases, all the data that we have since 1940s are all from mostly men and not enough women. Well, women's science and biology is different, and enough clinical data doesn't exist. So it's a matter of data. The second one is that the way we design solutions and think about solutions comes from understanding of the world's problems. And the framework of design is shaped from that point of view. And don't have enough women designers or different gender design in general. So the design of new solutions come from a deep understanding of problems, origins and scope, and their impact and their consequences, and how we communicate about them. And there is that part of it does not take into account. So from the gender, from the AI for good perspective and the responsible AI perspective, what we came up with when you spoke at the keynote at the conference, Rian, was that we need to create a global data commons on gender balanced data. I'm using the term gender balanced.
Yep.
Not gender neutral, but gender balanced data. So we can give scholars, universities, students, those who are building medical devices, those who are building cars, or who are basically creating misinformation toolkits or writing articles with AI, access to that data to be able to have a benchmark and a baseline to start designing solutions that can be basically gender balanced. I'm using the term balance more than neutral again. So that's the outcome of that conference. And we talked to UNESCO, we talked to a number of organizations. This is a hard work to do. Let's create a global data commons that is available to everyone publicly. So what information would go into
Are you? Are you
What?
just are you familiar with data.world?
Of course. Of course. This is not about creating a repository of data. I know that the word very well, yeah. But it's not about creating a repository of data. Data.world could be one of those organizations to host it. But it's about gathering a partnership on governing, right, ownership of such data that's going to be accessible to every country, every organization, every population. So designers are those who create advertisement, for instance, or clothing from or have access to that data. They can basically build against that data. So it's not about scoring or the technology of that. It's about the government.
No, but my understanding, I'm close friends with Brett and his CTO and co-founder. And I thought that their mission was also to be an attractor for that, like how to create this sort of data philanthropy, if you will, or the attraction of being able to have it. So it's not just about the repository, it is about the needing, I mean, that becomes a fundamental portion of being able to gather the data, right? Is giving people a space to put it and share it. And then to your point, then it's encouraging more people to collect more data, which I realize is missing. I'm a woman, right? I'm really clear on all the data that's missing around all my own, walk through the world, which is why we created part of what we've created as well. But I'm just trying to think of places where we can already leverage where people have built pieces of this.
Yeah, and they've been involved and been discussing with them too, since 2017 when data was early. But it's not about that. It's about how a government, how a UNESCO, how a Brookings Institute collaborate into doing research and models,
Right.
and how to gather data and who to access, who have access to it, and how we can monitor the quality of that data, how we basically maintain ethics around it. So there's a lot of stakeholders that need to be involved. And the point was to create a partnership around data commons and on basically gender balance data. So DataWorld is going to be one of those stakeholders. I will be one of them, but there's a need for a global collaboration. So let's say you need a UN agency on just that, pretty much, right? That's just that topic.
Have
So
you
that was
looked
basically the
at-
outcome that Rian keynoted, and we have a number of people that participate and handshook on, let's start this work. So this is where we are right now. This is a hard work. It takes me a few years. So this is the feedback on gender that you asked me, Laura. On the toolkit, I scanned quickly the toolkit we're representing as well. I don't know whose this toolkit is for yet, right? Maybe I'm just discovering it, sorry, but I didn't know. If I think about my mom, I don't know how my mom will use it. My mom is a huge gender equality advocate, but she's not a journalist or designer. She's a poet, but I don't know how she will use it. So I'm thinking about my son's professor. I don't know how he would use it. So I'm trying to imagine who's the user of that document, which I think you have a very precise idea, and how that user translates to the next user, which are the end of the chain. I'm thinking about the end of the chain pretty much.
Well,
Used by that, but Laura, can we have Laura's comments before she leaves?
I put in the chat box. I think it's going to be very critical to identify and target specific stakeholders that we need for this. It is so validating what Amir just said. My mother is not, I don't think, the target audience. I think we're going to have to, really decide. And some of this work's going to have to be done, I think, collectively, having conversations. I know they're difficult online, but I think we need to have some, I would say, iterative sessions, perhaps before, I don't know, or after March 21st. And I'll add one last thing. I think strategy is critical, but it's funny, I listening to everyone, Nancy and Amir and Rian and all of us, we are all, we've all been paid a lot of money to be strategists, but we're also going to have to be real tacticians. The tactics here and how we're going to get boots on the ground and actually get this done is a really, really important criteria.
I see points of leverage, right? My 21-year-old son just called me. He just got invited to go to an MIT immersive hackathon where they'll spend a week building applications in the world of immersive technology. He just ran a build fest at University of Texas where 30 kids built apps for social justice. We're using 3 different immersive platforms, including Snap AR goggles, right? Those are the places of input. Like the woman who runs his program is coming to a dinner that I'm hosting South by Southwest. Like just getting it into those hands starts to change that we want to change. There are plenty of gatherings and places where, if it's a solid enough tool and people give us some input on how they're using it, and become iterative, right? We don't have the only answer. We want to be other people's thinking around. I think there's plenty of places, and maybe start with universities. Go ahead. I
just want to end with, it's Gen Z, it's your son, it's Quincy. I am part of, so Singularity, X Prize, so does Amir, so do I. We're working just randomly, coincidentally, on a gamification version of a platform to get these Gen Zs to do this. There are things, it sounds to me very positive. We're all at this moment of convergence. I am so sorry that I have to leave. I'm committed. Go, bye.
Thank you for being here, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
I'll just also say, and we've got these 30, whatever, we've got more futurists that we have built this community with that we will invite to the 21st, depending on how this all looks and shapes. But I think that part of Gen Z, I think, is a leverage, but so are women, right? Women are very aware of the fact that the current system that we have isn't holding up and want a way in that feels more inviting. We talk about why women aren't in technology enough, why women are dropping out of comp sci, why women are not in the industries that are going to build and grow and profit from the future, like AI. and cybersecurity. And I think this becomes a really a beautiful invitation to be able to build with these tools in a way that we feel innately we want to build what we want to build, right? I think part of what keeps people away from it right now is a struggle about it. And the last thing I'll say, I just did this pilot program with Google on Wednesday. We did breakout sessions then as part of what I was doing with them. And you hear senior white male executives in the mid-level of their career talking about the frustration right now with capitalism. And they are really, really worried about how this is all going to be taken forward. So to Laura's point, to everyone's point, everyone across the spectrum right now is looking for a better answer. And the fact that we have something that we can offer that is so tangible for people to be able to work their way into it, I think there'll be plenty of places, that it will be very, very, people are hungry for it across these different groups. I mean, just in my own world, there's a million places I can go now. Now that we have something tangible, I can go share it very enthusiastically. So I'm very, very excited.
Well, let's go back to Amir's question, because what we said in the first thing, that it's not only who is doing it, but what their guiding framework is. And that is, I think, the major difference perhaps between this toolkit and a lot of the efforts that are being made to, if Laura Koch were here, she has a network in Latin America, for example, of women entrepreneurs, some of whom are in technology, some of whom are not, but they're affected by it. But she goes around and gives talks on this new frame for these women. So Amir, like if I'm thinking about X Prize, for example, how or if do you see it being useful to X Prize?
It could be useful in two ways. One is that X Prize does one thing only: launch global competitions. So when we design a global competition, it takes us 6 to 9 months usually. And then we frame a theme and imagine the design of the theme in a way that people will respond to by becoming a competitor or a participant. So the design of a future competition that will solve a problem is what we do. In the course of this design, we can use this toolkit to really understand and evaluate the role of multiple stakeholders and their ability to create more participation and to understand the layers of participation about gender equality. So this is one use of the toolkit. If the toolkit were to be maybe iterated differently, it could also be imagined to be useful for competitors. So competitors could use this toolkit as a guideline, as a framework to come up with solutions. It depends on the design, right? When we design a competition, participants have to come up with a solution or at least with the feasibility of a solution or the demonstration of a solution. For instance, when we launched the global competition on education about 6 years ago, the goal was to create a piece of software that could teach every children age 5 to 14 to read and write autonomously from full illiteracy to literacy in 9 months. And they have to do it in Swahili. So that was the competition design. Come up with a piece of software that is AI-based, that if you put in front of any children on an iPad or on a tablet, they will be self-guided with the machine learning tools to learn to read and write. And you have to do it not only in English or French or others, but in Swahili. So to push that. So that was the framing. And then we give them access to open source data. We give access to toolkits, with access to tablets from Google, with access to charging stations. So all those were the resources. So the toolkit in this case could be either useful for the design part, with all those researchers and designers that designed the competition, or if it can be iterated differently, it could be useful for competitors that will come up with the design. So let's
you say keep
sorry.
Amir, because for me, but all the X Prize and all of these challenges, I just had this conversation with a client on Friday. When we design these things to be competitive, we are in some ways promoting the same system, that there's a winner and there's losers, and the best one wins, whatever. And so part of what we're helping design, and in much smaller ways than the X Prize, is how we build collaborative experiences. So team A's input helps team B, helps team C, helps team D, and overall the whole thing is smarter and better. How we build more cooperative systems as opposed to competitive systems. So when you talk about this could be helpful for competitors, can you explain what you're envisioning? Because I'm not sure I'm following.
Well, competition does not preclude collaboration or cooperation. You could have both. A competition and a competitive system is needed when you have a time in mind. If you don't have any time in mind, then you can just work on open source and collaboration. If you want to add a layer of timing, so let's say we need to find solutions to carbon and capture of CO2 by 2030, there is a time element. So you wanted to create a competition. You want people to work towards a faster solutions. If this was part of design, if it's not part of design, we can create collaboration competitions, and those basically everybody wins. It doesn't have to be either or. X Prize is only one form of competition.
I know.
One form of challenge. There are many other ways, right, to do it. And I'm not saying this is a better one or a worse one, but Rian's question was about X Prize. X Prize will launch competitions, and within competitions, we have milestones where people collaborate up to a certain point. So you create a common state of the world together, and then out of that, you want to have different solutions. So you can mix and match.
Yeah, I would say that if the competition is geared towards excellence, then you don't, I would not necessarily think of it in terms of winners and losers. It is simply emulating the thing that is most practical or most advanced or whatever. But let's put that aside for a moment, if we may, because what we're really talking about is the detail of the questions.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get to some of that because we don't have much time left for that discussion. And I'd really like to have some of your feedback, and feel free, by the way, to also provide us with written feedback after this. But
I think I need to spend time, and I haven't spent enough time with the questions to have tactical feedback today.
But well, Amir, are you game to look at some of the questions? And Nancy's saying that she wants some time to fine tune, for fine tuning or not. I mean, you know, are you game to look at some of the questions, some of the detail? Because
again, I just was exposed to this today, but I'm not sure to be fully relevant. But if you want us to do at least to the exercise.
Well, I think, I mean, my suggestion is that we've developed a just a sort of quick, easy kind of survey format where we'll which walks you through the different pieces of it and has a place to capture detailed feedback or suggestions sort of bit by bit. And I think that what if you're, you know, our intention was to share that with you as part of the follow-up email from this event, and that, you know, then it helps you kind of walk through and offer the more sort of fine-tuned feedback, and then it also captures it for us in a format that we can more easily apply to the document. So you know, I think probably I'm hearing, Nancy, that you would like to get out of the parking lot sooner than later. Yeah. So I wonder if we could just have in our, you know, take another 5 minutes and see if there are other sort of strategic ideas about how, you know, Amir, you've shared, I think, both your piece about the data commons, I think actually it does inform in a very specific way, an addition that we can make to some of the scales that we've offered in terms of framing a scale specifically around the data being used in the, is the data gender balanced or not, or to what extent. And so that's, very helpful. And you've suggested a couple ways, Amir, that you could envision this toolkit being used in the X Prize scenario. Nancy, you've shared, the idea that getting this in the hands of people doing hackathons, building gatherings, those kinds of things, so that because it really is sort of meant to be those sort of really kind of deep context framing questions, before you, before you begin, let's check on this. So are there any other thoughts that come to you in this moment about specific audiences or uses of this tool that we could capture today, and then we'll go further with that piece on the 21st?
Yeah, I mean, the two that I have access to easily, right? So we've got all the university hackathon, all that kind of stuff. I would, we can certainly build out that network. It is all the femme futurists. It's all these women that are doing this work, and would, I think, really appreciate both having potent input on this, but also then become advocates for it. I can't guarantee every single one will do that, but they're all working the space in one way or another, right? There are people who are building out the metaverse, or people who are building this outside corporations, or people who, certainly all of them with artificial intelligence. So I think that'll be a community that will be influential to a certain extent, and can certainly give us really valuable feedback from the portion of the population that has been so muted along so much of this conversation. And then the third is I do have access right now to bigger and bigger companies. I've been working with Accenture, I've been working with Google, I've been working with Korn Ferry, and Korn Ferry wants to introduce me to every one of key clients to do the same kind of work. So if we can figure out a way, and I'll get more feedback from them, to subtly start to plant this thinking and people become more curious. Like, in my talks, Emma's usually in there annotating. And every time I talk about GDP, we end up talking about the social wealth index. We put a link into the page around the social wealth index, and people are very, very curious about that. So the more that we can have this tangible place where people can go and find out more and start to imagine, it would start to filter into their own work. I get to be little Johnny Appleseed, Jane Appleseed, of sprinkling this, and it grows. Like, I found out people are reading my book in other parts of the world didn't even know they were. I mean, Rianne's had that experience forever, but it's just people are looking for a place where they can plug in and learn more. And so those are places that I can play. And between the two of us, we've clarity. Amir's got World Economic Forum and UN audience. There's another woman named Mazami who does a lot of this work through the UN in terms of being able to empower local builders. If we get it to her, like I have a very vast network of people. What I've been hungering for is something tangible that I can share, and you guys built it. Like, I can't tell you how excited I am about the work that you have done thus far, and the fact that we can make it something that other people can help us shape and get stronger in. I'm effusive. You know me when I'm not, right? I get like cranky and defensive, and right now I'm not. I'm like the biggest.
Well, thank you, Nancy. We really did take in what you and Emma had shared about about wanting a sort of focal point, for the something concrete that could be the focus of the conversation. And so we really appreciate the input that you offered that brought us in part to this place. And I wonder if you, because you so quickly spin, how these things can work, is there, you're framing this as sort of the image I'm getting is that this remains, this toolkit remains open to input for sort of forever, but certainly for another longer chunk of time while we're getting it into people's hands, and that there's some process that continues in an ongoing way for allowing people to act it.
I'm very, very focused. That's why I was asking Amir the questions about the competition, that what we present, it demonstrates and lives the values of what it is that we're espousing, right? And in partner systems, we are in partnership. right? We're in iterative design. Everything there's tremendous hubris to imagine that we would have all the answers at this moment based on the things that we don't even know are going to exist 5 years from now. I think as people are playing with it, or not playing with this, but are using it and are experiencing it, we would want that feedback. The one thing I've always said about the work is that there are other people who are doing work that has either an input or an intersectionality into the work that we do, whether it's donut economics work, whether it's work out of the World Economic Forum, whether it's whatever it is. And so I think being more demonstrative of how these things work in collaboration together makes us more trustworthy, right? Makes us more something on. So I don't want to, I don't come in a position that we've got it all sorted. I think we've got it, that we've built a really strong framing for this, and that can pressure test it, the more we'll all continue to learn about it. And they're just to Amir's point around putting a question in around so-and-so, we'll learn more. So I would just say that would always be a group that would be open to input and feedback, and whether or not we think it's, useful or not, we'll incorporate it. If not, with the opportunity to educate somebody about why it's not. It's always about a conversation. I never do a Q&A anymore. Every time I talk about it, it's question and conversation. I don't have the answer all the time. I want to guide people into an exploration of getting there.
Thank you.
Well, Amir, what are some of your thoughts about, but first of all, I would really appreciate it if you and Nancy and of course Laura could go through the detail, because if we're asking for feedback from other people, which I think is a great idea, by the way, to leave it open for a while, and have a website or some place where people can actually provide their ideas. And I don't know how that would be set up, and maybe Amir and Nancy, you can help us with how we would set that up. But Amir, what are some of, well, before I finish my thought, if you could take a little time to look at it and email us some of your reactions to some of the wording, some of the fine points. But I gather that you like the idea of the scale for the projects. Where are you now? And of course, I think that the section on discussion is really, and we didn't emphasize that, it is meant to help you move the needle. And
No,
we need to add that to it, Sarah.
it's phenomenal.
Yeah, how do you move the needle? That's what the last section is about. So
people would want to be more conversation around this. So we don't just leave them there with this toolkit explanation. Good luck, right? I think this is why I go back to, again, we'll have more a sense of what people need to further this work. The reason I say this, AI is a probabilistic technology. It takes in data, it designs things, and it continues to shift and grow. It is not plug and play. And so we need to mirror, I think, the same thing in our world. Where is it that people would want to have more of that conversation? How can we meet that need? How do we grow the circles of influence? Or whatever word is conversation. That's what partnerism was designed to do, is start a movement around the conversation, right? As opposed to just being a fire hose that shoots more at people.
well, I loved what you said, Amir, about the data that is being used now is very old. And we need a data commons, but I would like to be a data commons informed by a certain frame, because otherwise, just because there are more women, frankly, will help, as it did in Northern European nations, because of the interest in caring policies, okay? But it isn't enough. We need to communicate a new way of thinking. And that, to me, is really our challenge. How do you gather and the data within a certain frame? And I'd love to see it used that way, but I think that will take a lot of thought, won't it?
Well, again, the problem is not data gathering or the different type of data, is what I use the term governance, and governance comes from initially identifying what we're going to be doing with this data, who's going to be using it, and why we're collecting it, how it's going to be collected. So pretty much is a design of this data commons that matters first, about the intentionality behind it. And then after that, start gathering data, because it has to be used in a certain manner, a certain way. So yeah, it goes, I think what you're talking about, the partnership and the consensus building should drive these data commons. And once we have the design of the data commons, I'm not just talking about the technical design, I'm just talking about also the usefulness and the usability and the ethics behind it, everything else. Then using the toolkit maybe as a way to form, as you put it nicely, a common language or a consensus of what we're going to be doing with it. So that would be pretty much the short version of what I think. I need more time to think about it more thoroughly, but in the world there is not understanding that data sharing is important. We started with COVID, we started with the climate action. Data will be shared while preserving privacy. But you cannot avoid IP and commercial interest and business interest around data. So we cannot basically forget about that. So framing how, and Laura is not with us, but she's talking about capital before, but finding a framework in which data could be beneficial and creating value in society and yet protecting people and being beneficial and being a form of a agreed upon approach is useful. What Nancy is talking about, collaboration is more important than competition. Think of it as a garden. A public garden is benefiting everyone. Everybody can walk in it. Some people will walk their dogs, some will run, some will fall in love, some will read a book, some will just stretched out, and there's a public benefit to it. So how can we create a public benefit? So this data commons about gender equality in general, I think, should be thought of it this way as a common good, and then think of it how it can be designed, built, sustained, and maintained to enable solutions that are AI-driven solutions, that are blockchain-driven solutions that are different with that data. So the intention behind it, I think the toolkit could be a very good framing and framework to think about it, and creating the partnership needed to sustain it.
So the way I'm going to jump in a minute, because now that I'm doing this on my phone's about to die. I think, again, technology. So I'm going to jump off in a minute, but I do think what Amir is pointing to is maybe that there are then these, so you've got the scales, you've got the 8 questions, you've got the discussion, but maybe what it pulls out of is a couple of really key, not just stakeholder groups, but key topics. Like data becomes a really, really key topic, and inclusion in some way becomes a really key topic. So we ensure that the people whom these decisions are being made are included in the actual decision making around them. So maybe there's like key pieces that come out of this that are another way of framing this work ahead, because I do think that data certainly is a really, really critical piece of it. There's multiple aspects to it, but maybe there's 2 or 3 others that are complementary to all the work you guys have already done. I see that.
Thank you so much. And thank you for hanging in there till your phone's last moments.
Yeah, I'm going
We'll be in touch.
Get directions to where I'm going, and then continue on my day. But thank you all so much. I will give feedback on the scales and on all the work you guys have done so far. I'm really excited about the fact that we are entering into South by Southwest, which is the biggest, I call it like the global convention for entrepreneurs in this space. It's our little convention, and being able to even like informally seed this with people over the next few days, it'll be really powerful. So I will be in touch. Thank you all. Nice to meet you, Amir.
We will be in touch with you.
Stay
Bye, guys.
in touch with us within the next week. Would that be asking too much? Because we would like to have your feedback.
Absolutely. Absolutely, with pleasure. Yeah, Sarah, I'm happy to follow up, take some time to maybe the questionnaire survey that you have, whatever tool, I'm happy to
yeah, I'm also very interested in how this could fit into your film festival.
I was thinking about it, yeah.
because I think that it is such a good frame for so much of what the values are. I mean, it would have to be massaged. It isn't just technology, it's everything. Story.
Everything is everything. And I was thinking while we were presenting, I was looking at the toolkit, how a simplified version of this, because I was thinking about this kid in Mumbai or in Kenya being asked to do something about the future. They don't understand normative causes, they don't understand philosophy yet, or they might not thinking about all the connection point that you have been highlighting. So how can we get them started in a simple manner to think about the cornerstones of the future and what matters? So we talk about political issues, we talk about injustice, we talk about, I don't know, polarization, but people don't think about these terms necessarily. They think about family values, they think about happiness, they think about a future where there is less demagogy, for instance, right? So I don't know how to say it, but I think there is really a direction that you have started, which I fall in love with the partnership systems that could be beneficial to a wider audience, not just the audience that have a bachelor degree or high school degree, people that are smart, they're thinking, but they don't think in a cognitive terms necessarily, or the language that we use. Because they are also being moved by stories, and there are people.
Is that a project that that the X Prize could take on? I mean, to just simplify this for the film festival?
X Prize probably not, but I'm working with Arizona State University.
With which state university?
Arizona State University, ASU. They have a film school and they have a school of imagination in the future.
Oh,
They may be intrigued and interested in simplifying or basically taking the toolkit to a different level. We can probably find some internship to work on it. X Prize won't do it if it's not part of a competition, because X Prize is a bit, yeah, it's too much work for them. they're not a research organization. Yeah.
Isn't there a group at the University of Arizona that we were working with, Sarah?
No, that was Arkansas.
Oh, Arkansas. Well, listen, I think that's a great idea to get the University of Arizona group. What are these two groups that you are working with?
Let me find the link for you 1 second quickly.
Yeah, if
It's the film school and the School of Imagination and the Future.
I love that. School of Imagination for the Future. Well, we need some individuals who become interested.
I put the link on the chat here on the
Thank you, Amir.
Zoom chat, and save it because it goes away after Zoom.
Will you put that in your notes there, Quincy?
Yes.
Thank you.
I also can act as a liaison too.
So these guys are really have been doing this for many years now. They're trying to do foresight. They really care about the common good. They're scholars, they're researchers. So, and they will probably be interested, intrigued about the work, if they don't know it already.
Yeah, because we really don't have the resources, to take that on. But I think it would be fabulous if the film school and the School for Imagination for the Future were to really be partners in this.
There's another group that you should add to your Quincy. It's this one. It's called Leonardo. I think that's the correct link.
Thank you.
Let me see. Yeah, that's Leonardo.
See, I think that we can really help with this toolkit to shift the thinking to what is possible. And when you said, people aren't thinking about these cornerstones, that's precisely how domination systems keep rebuilding themselves, is on these 4 cornerstones. You know, if you think of the priorities of Hitler's Germany or Khomeini's Iran or the Taliban or the rightist fundamentalist alliance or Putin. Putin actually reduced significantly the penalty for family violence. Did you know that?
I didn't know, but I'm not surprised.
No, but because it fits the configuration.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets the connection between family being authoritarian and violent and the state being authoritarian and violent. And he gets the gendered part of it. I mean, he and Trump are really poster children, poster boys for the domination system. Because for them, they're only you either nominate or you're nominated. There is no partnership alternative. If we can get people to think about these foundations, we can really accelerate movements so significantly.
I think I agree with everything you're saying, Rian, of course, naturally. We will find some resources to basically make the toolkit more accessible to a wider audience, because the paradigm shift or the paradigm that you mentioned at the beginning of this call is real. But this mode, right, that some cannot basically cross, right, is there.
Yes.
And if you don't have enough people that want and claim what they need about the future, we're going to end up with the same narrative as always. We're going to be basically looking philanthropically at what we think about others would benefit. We don't have enough voice to support what you're saying. So trying to make it more accessible. So the film is just an artifice, right? It's one way to hear about stories. There are many other ways to do it, but this is one way. And these groups that I mentioned, these two are good partners. There are many others. There's a group at Cambridge University, Future of Intelligence group at Oxford. These are groups that are thinking about this topic. And I'm sure we can find others on the way, but the film festival will gather many, many, many interesting people, from advertisement to research to advocacy, because in a shape or form, they're all thinking about the future that we want. And if we give them a simple framework, which is this toolkit or a version of the toolkit, we could unify the conversation, make people talk about the same things, which is your goal, by the way.
That's the point, because once we become conscious, we will take the actions that are needed. But as long as we're all over the place and can't connect the dots, that's the problem. Amir, you are wonderful. And I can see that you have a huge contribution to make to this, and I'm really grateful.
Well, I'm just learning, so happy to contribute in any shape I can. I like your work, Rian. So I don't have a lot of time, but I will spend the time that I can.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you so much.
Of course, with
Well,
pleasure.
we are at the end of the hour, and I think if you give some thought to who you want to connect us with in these three places after you have looked at it and
Of
made
course.
your suggestions, I think that would be excellent, because I'd like to get going.
Wonderful.
right.
Thank you very much for the call, and looking for your email, Sarah, to follow up.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for being here, Amir. Lovely to meet you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Kinsey. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye, Rian.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Sarah and Quincy, can you stay for just a moment?
Yeah.
Well, we got 3